Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm with Pixie Turner, aka plant-based Pixie.
Hello.
Hello, you are a food blogger and now an author. So you
Yes.
and the story behind your book is amazing. So let's go right back to the start for anyone who doesn't follow you and just share a bit about your journey with food and wellness and true health.
Yeah, so about 5-ish years ago now, I started my Instagram account. I started posting pictures of food because I had a little bit of a health scare. So in very typical wellness blogger style, I had a little bit of a health scare in the sense that I had a blood test which showed my cholesterol was really abnormally high, and it was suspected to be genetic, but my doctor said, give it a year and you can make any lifestyle changes if you want to. But if it is genetic, they won't make any difference. But feel free to give it a go. So I decided to give it a bit of a go. I went straight to Dr. Google and I went straight to Instagram. And I found all the Australian and UK wellness bloggers, the kind of who at the time would be put under the umbrella of clean eating bloggers.
Mm.
I found all of them and I decided to well, basically, I looked at their stories. They had these really compelling narratives about how they'd, cured themselves of this, that, and the other. They looked the epitome of health. They all looked really attractive. And so I decided to do exactly what they were doing and decided to cut out a huge number of things from my diet in order to be healthier. So in the end, I was basically vegan, gluten-free, refined sugar-free, soy-free, eating copious numbers of weird superfood powders, doing like weird juicing sessions and doing all the crazy stuff. Like it was really quite extreme. And over time, it made me really miserable and really anxious around food. I became really, really obsessed, and it was just not healthy at all. And it wasn't until I went traveling and I was in Australia where of course, as all wellness bloggers do, when you go to other countries, you make friends with other wellness bloggers and you reinforce that beautiful echo chamber of views by only hanging out with them. So that's what I did. And I was in Australia and I was hanging out with these wellness bloggers, and one of them said, I would never dream of vaccinating my children. And that kind of set off alarm bells in my head. And I just went, what the hell? What am I doing with these people? I have a science degree. I don't belong here. And that was really the turning point for me when I realized that I was really totally associated with the wrong people and I didn't belong with this group of people. And what they were saying was potentially actually really harmful. And so I went back and started actually doing proper research by reading the actual scientific research, not just Googling, behind what a lot of these wellness bloggers were saying, and realized that most of it is just crap. Most of it was totally untrue. And it made me really angry. It made me really angry that I had fallen for this, that my friends had fallen for it, and that those messages were still out there and that anyone could access them just at the touch of a button. And so I came back to the UK and I thought to myself, I need to do something about this. And I started writing about these various myths, writing about these different aspects of this sort of the clean eating movement and about wellness and how rubbish it all was. And I realized that I was attacking some of these bloggers for not having nutrition qualifications when I myself didn't have any nutrition qualifications. So I thought that's a bit hypocritical. Let's go get a nutrition degree. So I did a master's in nutrition,
Yeah.
just because it was really interesting. I really loved it. And nutrition is now my career, which is very exciting. But that's when the book came about, because while I was studying, I was writing more and more about various health and nutrition myths, and that's when I got approached by various agents to talk about writing a book. And now, like a year and a half later, it's here.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
That is so exciting. So I was going to ask you like why this book, but you've kind of gone into that already, like busting those myths and getting the actual knowledge out to the public. Um, how did you feel like going into the book? Because obviously this book is very different to most of the nutrition books out there, and you
Yeah.
are stepping on a few toes and probably pissing some people off, which is always
Oh, definitely,
which is
yeah.
always like what you should be doing if you're trying to make change. But how did you really feel setting out? Were you nervous? Were you like excited or?
Yeah, I was a bit nervous because I thought, there are so many amazing nutrition professionals out there who have way more experience than I do in the general field of nutrition. And I definitely felt that imposter syndrome that I, was too young to be writing a book and that I wasn't experienced enough to be writing a book. But I mean, obviously, this book has come about because of my own personal experiences with having fallen for these myths. So in that sense, I managed to convince myself that I was the right person to write it. But it was very scary. I didn't really mind stepping on people's toes in the set because I know that what I'm saying is right and backed by evidence, and what they are saying is not. And so I don't mind that because I've referenced everything in this book, so I know that I'm completely covered. When I have quoted people, it is direct quotes that I've copied and pasted. So I haven't put words in people's mouths. I've actually, quoted them directly. Most of the time, though, I make sure not to mention any names in case, just in case lawyers get a bit angry.
Yeah, I think that's really admirable though, like choosing to do what's right rather than, because you could easily have gone down the wellness route still as a blogger, and a lot of these bloggers are doing brand deals and all this kind of stuff and probably earning like a lot of money from those kind of things.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely.
I think it's really admirable to stand up for what's right and to to acknowledge that you've changed your mind as well, because most people
Yeah,
don't do that.
yeah, I've been very honest and said that I made mistakes, I was wrong, and that I'm trying to do better. And part of that was getting a proper qualification, getting properly certified, registering with a regulatory board to make sure that everything I do and everything I say is accurate and is backed by evidence. So I make sure, I know that I have to be careful with what I say online. So I do make sure that I can reinforce everything I say with evidence. And I get like the book was fact checked by people who are more experienced than I am. A lot of my Instagram captions, even I send to another nutritionist who checks them for me. So I'm very careful, but I have
Yeah.
to be very careful because people will call out anything that's even slightly wrong or even slightly makes them annoyed because it's kind of stepping on their ideas about food.
So I want to jump on something you mentioned there, evidence based. This is a term that I've only become familiar with as a consumer, like regular person, not a nutritionist, in the past 6 months or so, I want to say. And I am a bit of a nutrition geek, so I imagine there's a lot of people listening who won't have a clue what evidence based means and why it's so important. So basically, sum up in a nutshell for us, if you can, what evidence based means and why we should be getting evidence based advice when it comes to health rather than advice from our Instagram feeds.
Yeah. Well, the main problem with Instagram is that anyone can say anything and no one has to back up anything they say. If something is evidence-based, it means there is some kind of reference. It means there is something that people can go to find out more that has been properly peer reviewed, been properly checked and published in a scientific journal, which means it's gone through an extremely rigorous ethics process. It's gone through peer review, which means that other scientists have anonymously checked it and torn it to shreds in order to make it the best possible bit of research that it can be. And it's been accepted by a journal which has decided that this is worthy of publication. So it's a really strict process that research has to go through before it even gets to the general public. And if something's gone through that process, then almost all the time, there are obviously always going to be a few exceptions, but almost all the time that means that is something that's potentially worth listening to. And the only problem there is that you can find research that says almost anything. And the key bit about something being evidence-based is that it's not just that there is necessarily one study which agrees, but it's the overall body of evidence. So it's not looking at individual bits, but looking at the overall picture of evidence and seeing in which direction that points. And this is why, for example, we have government guidelines that say that everyone should be taking a vitamin D supplement in winter. That is not just based on one person's hunch. It's not based on one individual. It's not so like an anecdote, which is what you see on Instagram. It's kind of it's the whole thing of, oh, this really worked for me, therefore you should try it too. Like that's it's a starting point for science, but it's not what we should be relying on to make health decisions. And so it's looking at the kind of overall picture of what all the research shows and what we should potentially be looking to as a result of that. So ideally, the decisions we make about our health should be both evidence-based and science-based, because it's the overall picture that the scientific process points us in the direction of that we should be looking to, and not just what one individual person says. So even though someone you really admire could say, oh, hey, I tried this, it's really great, that's just an anecdote or a case study. It's definitely not on the same level as, say, hundreds of scientific studies, which all, when taken together, point in a different direction.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really important as well, because something I've now noticed is anyone can link to like one random study, but that study could be complete crap. It could just,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
from a scientific point of view, it could be, I don't know what the fancy terminology is, but it could have been done in a way that was biased, or, So,
Yeah, and also because of chance, you can find almost anything. For example, I like to compare it to like tossing a coin. You could toss a coin 10 times and get 10 heads. That doesn't mean that the probability of getting heads is 100%. It's still 50-50. It just means that you've had that one in, how it was, like one in a million chance or whatever it is of getting 10 heads in a row. It's actually not one in a million, but I'm not very prepared to do the maths right now. But so you can always find exceptions. But it's the overall guidelines, that's what's more important.
yeah. And I think the issue is people look to the exceptions, because the exceptions are people who've sensationalized having experienced an exception, like being cured of something extreme or whatever, are
Yeah.
shouting about it on Instagram.
It's more exciting, isn't it?
Yeah,
The extreme is much more exciting, and we're more likely to listen to it. We're more drawn to it.
yeah. So, what can people be doing then to sort of protect themselves from that online? Who can they be following? Apart from you, obviously.
I think it's important that people look at where they're getting their health information from online, or their information about nutrition. If someone doesn't have a degree in nutrition, I would say they probably should be very careful about the information they put out there. And generally, the best people to listen to are the ones who are registered dietitians or registered nutritionists. So either people who have RD next to their name, or people who have RNUTR or ANUTR next to their name. That is a sign that they're registered with a regulatory body that monitors them really carefully. They have to be held to very, very high standards, and it means they have at least a degree in nutrition, and they've been verified to be, good at it enough that they can join these boards. So those are always going to be the best people to look out for. If something sounds too good to be true, it almost definitely will be. And if something sounds really too extreme or too far removed from what maybe more educated people are saying, then it might be good to be wary. Also, it's generally the whole anecdote thing again. If someone's just relying on literally themselves as the only source of information, like literally self-experimentation, that's not really good enough. But it's much more compelling because it's more personal as well. So I think people just need to be more skeptical, and not just think that because someone has a nice face or a nice Instagram or a nice set of abs, that they are therefore qualified to talk about nutrition.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I don't want to shout about myself like I'm some expert, but even me, who is someone who follows registered dietitians and keeps up with, or tries to keep up with, like government guidelines and all that kind of stuff, I'm a bit of a health geek, I guess. Even I have been sucked into it. The
It's
marketing
so
and
easily done, yeah.
I think especially as women, there's so much like sexiness around supplement marketing and girls sponsored by massive companies, and they're on Instagram or on their vlogs or whatever in these gorgeous little gym outfits saying I love BCAAs, and I even though I've heard the opposite, I've gone to my boyfriend and said, babe, do I need to order BCAAs to have before the gym? And he's like, no, don't be ridiculous.
But it just shows how powerful those images
Yeah,
are, isn't it? That, we're so drawn to them. We think that if we then take the same supplements, use the same products, we'll look like them, even though that might be biologically completely impossible because we have a completely different body shape.
yeah, yeah. So any supplements or anything, I always go to reliable sources and either like search on their website or see if they're talking about it, if it's like a hot topic in the press. I think it's important to follow those types of people, like you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be the messages are probably going to be more boring, but at least they're going to be accurate.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like that with anything like health, fitness, weight loss. Like, it's there's no sexy like magic pill. It's all just like boring, standard. Eat your vegetables.
Yeah.
Go to the
And
gym.
probably some other things too. Don't just
Yeah,
eat vegetables.
yeah. Very good point. Some people have you believe that.
Oh God, yeah, I know.
So that's a good segue onto like diet culture and food shaming. Um, I, as an example, I used to be vegan, and I genuinely believed that the vegan diet was the perfect diet for humans and the only diet people should be eating. And when I started experiencing like cravings and low energy and headaches and all these other things, and slowly incorporated eggs and meat and dairy back into my diet, I felt better. And obviously that's anecdotal, but I felt like a terrible person. And I've talked about this before because
Mm.
I've been shown this cultural, like, I don't know, it's like because I'd been in this circle of people who were preaching about this vegan diet online, and this is just an example, obviously this happens with paleo or whatever else, as you know. I felt like I had to eat that way in order to be healthy.
Mm.
And I know you've spoken about this before, so what are your thoughts on like food shaming and diet culture of, just ramming your ideas down someone's throat online basically and attacking them for their opinions if they eat anything else that's on your like no, you know,
Yeah. I
naughty
think it's so
list.
interesting how these different camps are basically very religious in their approach. It's very black and white absolutist. You're in or you're out. It's
Yeah,
very religious. It's very much like, preaching your religion onto someone. And it is because our food is so closely tied to our identity. But yeah, that involves a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of, saying, oh, you're wrong because of the way that you eat. And I don't think that's acceptable in any shape or form. I don't think we really have the right to judge anyone on their food choices because we have no experience of living in their body. We have absolutely no idea how they feel. We don't know anything about their physical history and their emotional feelings. We don't know what their relationship with food is like. We don't know absolutely nothing about them. Who are we to judge the way someone else eats when we have no experience of living in their body? All we know is how our own bodies feel. And, our body's pretty good at sending us signals in terms of what it wants from us. So, taking your example of having that low energy, that was a sign that there was something missing and that you needed to change something in your diet or do something different in order to be able to function a lot better. And you responded to that in the best way, which is by giving your body exactly what it needed, which it sounded like it was potentially things like B12 and iron. So that was exactly the right thing to do because your body was sending a signal saying something is wrong, please fix it. And you did.
yeah,
But of course, as soon as you change your way of eating, and especially if you've been involved in a certain community, as soon as you go against anything that these people are saying, you are very harshly judged. I mean, I've been sent so much abuse online for the way I eat, despite the fact that the message I promote is completely irrelevant to the way I eat. The way I personally choose to eat has literally no bearing whatsoever on the messages that I put out there, which are very much objective rather than subjective. But I don't think food shaming should have any place at all. I don't think that anyone should be made to feel guilty or judged or made to feel like they're doing something wrong just because of the way they're eating. There's so much more to a person than the way they eat. It's literally just one really small part of our identity. And, I just think it's so awful the way we can treat each other simply because we eat differently. It's really, really quite awful.
Yeah. And I think my example is personal because I didn't eat meat or animal products for like ethical reasons. So
Mm.
I remember literally like crying into my scrambled eggs when I was eating them. It's like
It's quite traumatic. It can be really quite traumatic.
I
Yeah.
physically felt better, but I just had this battle in my head because I'd just been in this circle of messaging for years
Mm.
and watched all these documentaries about the fact that I was probably, gonna get cancer if I ate these products, and just all this stuff that's just so much fear mongering around it. And I think
Exactly. Yeah.
going back to the anecdotal stuff, I think that comes into play a lot as well, because people think, oh, well, I eat a vegan diet, or I eat paleo, or I eat refined sugar free, and I feel amazing. So why don't you? Like, you must be doing something wrong.
Yeah, no, exactly. Placing the blame back on the individual rather than the way that rather than there being something that's not quite ideal for them in terms of the way they're eating. No, it must be you as a person that's doing something wrong
Yeah,
rather than the process which is wrong. Which is, yeah,
yeah,
just no, it's so bad. Yeah.
I know.
But it's interesting what you said, because one of the issues with social media is that it really allows us to sit within an echo chamber of beliefs. So I would imagine that most people in your situation, I mean, I'm guessing in your situation, you were mainly following people who were eating the same way as you were on social media.
Yeah,
And that's the trap that we can so easily fall into, is only following people who have the same ideas, who never challenge us, who always who eat the exact same way, think the exact same way about food. And that really leads us to believe it reinforces the idea that this is the right way of eating, because everyone who you follow on social media is doing the same thing. How can they all be wrong in that sense? And you don't really get challenged about those beliefs on social media. And I think actually following people on social media who eat in a really wide variety of different ways is really important, because it just serves as a reminder that people eat differently, people think differently, and that your way of eating might not be as prevalent as you initially thought it was. So I would actually say that, anyone, even if you eat in a very specific way and you have very strong beliefs about eating that certain way, you should still follow people who eat differently, just to remind you that these people exist and that there are different ways of eating that
yeah,
are all okay, and that people thrive on different ways of eating.
yeah, exactly. And they're alive and healthy humans, and they're not eating the way you're eating, and that's okay.
Yeah, and they're real human beings, with feelings. So
Yeah.
don't throw abuse at them.
Yeah. Not bashing vegans at all, obviously. Just putting that in as a disclaimer, because
No, it's the
I,
same with all the low carb gang at the moment. I mean, it's very religious. It's like a cult in a lot of ways.
yeah, it's just, yeah, I think people are stubborn. They get convinced of like it's their way or no way. So it's hard like being challenged when you're in that mindset.
Yeah, it really is. It's really hard to actually listen to a different perspective. It's really challenging. Yeah.
So going back to, vegan, paleo, refined sugar free, whatever else, a large section of the book is busting nutrition myths. So I obviously recommend everyone go and buy the book and read it. But
Please do.
but can we go into a few of your like top pet peeves in the wellness industry that piss you off?
Yes. So the biggest
If you
one
can
is
pick a
probably,
few.
well, at the moment, the biggest one is probably everything to do with sugar, because there are so many myths around sugar. We've started to kind of realize that refined sugar free is a load of bollocks. Because refined sugar and unrefined sugar are biochemically almost identical. It's only once you start eating them in the hundreds of grams per day that they actually have significantly different effects in your body. But if you're eating like 200 grams of coconut sugar in one day, you are probably eating too much sugar. And I would recommend cutting that down maybe a little bit. But at the level of sugar that, is kind of more in the ideal range of what we should be going for, as in not too high, but also not necessarily cutting out entirely. The difference between things like coconut sugar and caster sugar are so insignificant. You're they're both they both come from plants. They're both technically natural. They're both processed in some way, and they're about 99% the same. So, but one is considerably more expensive and therefore more desirable than the other. And I think people have started to realize that there actually isn't that much difference, and that, just because something contains maple syrup doesn't automatically make it healthy. Whereas if you have that same dish with caster sugar, it's automatically unhealthy. But there are huge issues with the way we talk about sugar, and this whole message of limit your added sugar consumption has been translated in wellness into avoid sugar at all costs, which is so it's really been taken to the extreme. It's not just this nice, accurate and sensible message of moderation. It's actually become, this is a dangerous substance that's killing us all, which it isn't. Not at all. I mean, it's literally impossible to live without sugar, because glucose, a sugar, is found in pretty much every single food. So you literally can't avoid it. But it's also seen as something that's addictive, even though technically it's actually not considered to be an addictive substance. You can't really be addicted to sugar. I mean, think about it. When was the last time you saw someone literally spooning sugar into their mouths? You don't see it. You don't see it at all. What you do see is people are more likely to overeat on foods that are very highly palatable. And these are foods that are high in sugar and fat, and often starch as well. So it's that really nice combination for those three things that kind of makes food really, really palatable, and therefore means we're more likely to overeat on it because it just tastes so good. And also from an evolutionary perspective, we are evolutionary designed to be drawn towards those foods because they keep us alive for longer, because they contain more calories. So that makes sense. But no one's eating pure sugar, and no one's literally snorting sugar or whatever. People just aren't doing that. And so to say that sugar is an addictive substance is really a misunderstanding completely of the way that we eat food. And it's just so misleading as well. And I think it goes back to the idea of making people scared of eating certain foods or eating in a certain way, which is just so wrong. So I really have a lot of issues with the way people talk about sugar. And it's still annoying. I still see so many of these wellness people going like, oh, have all this maple syrup. Like, this is a sugar-free cake with maple syrup. I'm like, no, maple syrup is literally sugar.
Yeah. Tastes good, but like, I wouldn't put maple syrup in a cupcake over caster sugar, because that's just wrong.
Oh, hell no. No, that's completely the wrong texture. If you're making a Victoria sponge, you need caster sugar, because otherwise the texture will be so wrong, it just won't work. Whereas if you're doing something like banana bread, maple syrup can actually be really good, because it adds sort of extra moisture and makes it, it's not supposed to be something that's light and fluffy. It's supposed to be a bit more dense. And so it works really well in terms of making a cake more, I hate the word, but, moist and tasty. So it depends. The one you should use should depend on what you're making.
Yeah.
And choosing one type of sugar over another for health reasons just doesn't make sense, because the difference between them is just so insignificant in the context of your daily diet.
Yeah, because
that's like the big one.
I've even seen people go on about sugar causing cancer and all sorts of awful things like that.
Yeah, and this comes from a really big misunderstanding in how cancer works. Obviously, cancer is extremely, extremely complicated, and to boil it down to just sugar causes cancer is just so reductionist, so oversimplified. It's really, cancer doesn't have one cause. It's a very complicated thing. If it had one cause, we would have kind of cured it by now. We're pretty good at doing that sort of thing, but it's very, very complicated. And what happens with cancer cells is often that the way our body produces energy involves broadly speaking, two processes, which is glycolysis, which doesn't require oxygen, and oxidative phosphorylation, which does require oxygen. And you get the most energy out of any food by doing both processes. But cancer cells divide so quickly, and that they don't bother relying on oxygen necessarily, and they mainly do the first process. And the first process really, you can only go through the first process with glucose, which is sugar. Things like fats and proteins get fed into the more of the second part. So that's where this idea that sugar drives cancer has come from, even though it's more complicated. It's actually the cancer that drives the process rather than the process driving cancer. So people
Yeah.
have got they've got it the wrong way around as to which causes which. It's actually the cancer that's causing the extra sugar consumption of those cells rather than the sugar causing the cells to do what they're doing,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
it
people have
does.
really got it confused as to which way round it is, and it's actually the cancer that's causing the cells to behave in that certain way.
Yeah. But it's easy to just throw out the big C word, isn't it? And tell people
Yeah,
what
exactly.
to eat
Also,
based on that.
absolutely, and also what I've described is not the case in all cancer as well, because cancer is hugely varied and works in a very wide, different number of ways. So it's not that that is the case for every single kind as well.
Yeah. Cool. Glad to clear that up.
Sugar does not cause cancer.
Yeah. And refined sugar free is bullshit for anyone listening who still thinks that it's a thing.
Yeah, just buy caster sugar. It's so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And it makes most cakes better anyway.
Yeah. So, next myth.
Ooh, I'm gonna go for the idea that cooking food kills all the nutrients in it.
So, like the
That is a
raw
big
thing.
myth. Yeah, but I think that's something that obviously raw foodists take that to the real extreme. But I also feel like a lot of people think that if they cook certain vegetables, it means that they are basically nutritionally depleted and they're not getting anything from them, which is not true. There are certain vegetables that, for example, you get more nutrients from them if they're cooked, and other ones where you get more nutrients from them if they're raw. It very much depends on the nutrient and depends on the vegetable. And it ties in very nicely with this idea that's gone especially in wellness, which is that microwaves are so bad for you. They nuke your food. There's just absolutely terrible, which is also not true. Microwaving is actually one of the best ways of cooking food because it's one of the quickest ways. And the quicker you cook something, the less opportunity there is for nutrients to potentially leak out or go out of the food. So that's why, for example, microwaving or what other quick ones are there? Or like really quick, like pan frying something, like searing something is like a way of you're cooking something for less time. Therefore, there's potentially more nutrients in there. And one of the worst ways in terms of preserving nutrients you can cook is boiling, because a lot of some of the nutrients will go out into the water, and you throw that water away. But at the same time, there's obviously nothing wrong with boiling certain vegetables if it means you actually eat the vegetables,
Yeah.
because what it essentially boils down to is eat your vegetables.
Boils
And
down to.
if you prefer them a certain way, eat them that way, because at least you're going to eat them. I mean,
Yeah.
look, for example, if I take myself, I don't like boiled carrots. I find them extremely dull. I really like raw carrots, but the best way I like carrots is roasting them. And so, of course, I'm going to either eat them raw or roast them rather than boil them, because that's the way I prefer them, and that way I'm actually going to eat them, whereas I'm less likely to eat as many or eat them at all if they're boiled. So there's absolutely no point in cooking your vegetables if it means you're not going to eat them.
Yeah.
There's no point keeping them raw if it means you're not going to eat them. Just eat your vegetables and don't stress too much about whether they're cooked or not.
Yeah. That's so
Apart
true.
from things like potatoes, obviously, like potatoes need to be cooked, otherwise they're really disgusting.
Yeah.
But some things like tomatoes, which are good either way, just eat them in the way you enjoy them the most, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing about all these different things, that the focus is so much on like individual nutrients, and no one ever talks about the fact that you should actually just eat food in a way that you enjoy eating food, because food is there to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
Like all the I mean, it's interesting, I think, to talk about the sort of minutiae of detail around nutrition, but in the end the most important thing is you actually enjoy your food, because you're going to be eating food every day. Let's enjoy the process at least.
Exactly. It's just like fitness. Like, if you want to get fit, you have to find something you enjoy, because you're just going to repel it at any opportunity if you don't want to do it and you don't enjoy it. It's the same with health.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's so much food out there to try. You're bound to find something that you like. So, yeah.
Exactly, just enjoy it. It's the
Yeah.
most important thing.
Yeah. I want to finish, before we go into the quick round questions that I ask everyone at the end, I want to finish our nutrition chat on something a bit more fun and lighthearted and poking fun at the wellness industry a little bit. You shared on Twitter a while ago, like hashtag because wellness or something like that.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
remember? And
I remember.
it was like stupid or things that you look back on that you did now that make you cringe or that you would never do ever again, basically. So what is your like one or two things that you used to do that you look back on now and you're just like, why?
Ooh, I used to take green superfood powders that tasted like pond and were absolutely disgusting. I mean, they were so vile. Things like spirulina are so beyond disgusting. I don't understand how anyone manages to eat them, but I forced them down my throat because I thought that I needed them in order to be healthy. And I only did
Yeah.
that because of wellness. That's probably the biggest one. The other thing is I stopped eating bread, and that makes me so sad because I thought gluten was out to get me. I have
Yeah.
no problem with gluten whatsoever. I can eat gluten literally, I can eat nothing but bread all day and I'll be just fine.
Yeah.
But I cut out bread because wellness said that gluten is bad for you. And
Yeah.
that makes me so sad looking back because I honestly love bread. I think it's such a wonderful food.
Yeah. I'm lucky that I never cut out bread. I don't think I would have had the strength in me to do that. I love bread.
Good for you. Good
But
for you. Never,
one,
don't do it. Don't cut out bread.
yeah, unless you're celiac, then get gluten-free
Yeah,
bread.
of course, yes, definitely.
One, my thing is dairy. So obviously I said I was vegan, but even before that, um, I honestly believed that dairy was like evil, and it was gonna give people
Oh,
cancer,
was it the whole
and it
leaching calcium
was
from your bones thing as well?
exactly, yeah, like all that stuff. Basically, if anyone's watched What the Health, like I just believed everything in that documentary. Now obviously I know better,
Spoiler alert,
but
there is basically no accurate science in that documentary whatsoever.
so yeah, dairy was one big thing for me. I'm a big tea addict. I love a good cup of tea, and I used to have like soy milk, almond milk, all these other milks in my tea, and it is just not the same. And I would never not have cow's milk in my tea now.
I am so with you there. Like, if I put any other milk in my tea, I literally can't drink it. It tastes revolting. And it just, and also, especially with almond milk, you get all those like floaty bits and it separates and it
Yeah,
goes really horrible. Ooh, no,
yeah,
can't do it. Cow's milk or no milk. I'd rather just not drink tea at all than have tea without cow's milk. It's just not worth it.
yeah. I know. I love milk and butter. So still on the dairy thing, hot buttered toast. Like toast, just I'm sorry to anyone listening who is dairy free, not by choice, or is vegan by choice and misses butter, but butter is just life. And I
Oh,
used to
yes.
not eat it because dairy and also because saturated fat, and saturated fat is evil and you should never eat it. Which,
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously, I mean, butter shouldn't be like the only source of
Yeah.
fat in your diet, but like sometimes cooking with butter just makes something taste so much better. Mushrooms in butter, oh my God, it is an absolute game changer. It just tastes incredible. I never cook mushrooms in olive oil ever anymore because you just can't compare it. It's just nowhere near as delicious. And yeah, oh, butter on hot cross buns.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yes.
Or just like
So
hot
good.
toast. So good.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Butter
all
just,
the best things happen when you put butter and gluten together,
yeah,
like croissants.
definitely. Yeah. I love it. So, moving on to our last like quick round questions that I ask everyone. So, this podcast is all about empowering women to put themselves first and make time for themselves. What is your go-to self-care ritual that you fall back on if you've had a really long, busy day and you want to chill out?
Face mask and Netflix,
Awesome.
always. I love putting a face mask on. It's just, you know, all the makeup off, face mask on, relax.
Yeah,
It's great.
love it. Next question is what is challenging you to leave your comfort zone and grow recently?
Ooh, I'm having to do a lot more public speaking recently, which I'm fine with normally, but it's talking about myself a lot more than I'm used to and talking about the book, and it's quite scary to see people's reaction to something I've spent literally a year of my life working on. So it's forcing me to develop a thicker skin, definitely.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's really like not selling yourself, because the book, like, and what it's about sells itself, but at those events, like, you're there to talk about the book, to hopefully let people know about the book and get them to go and buy it. So it's
Exactly. Yeah.
really like putting yourself out there. Yeah,
Yeah, it's scary.
that's cool though. And the next question is, what are your 2018 goals? So we've already sort of a few months in now, but what are your goals for the next 6 to 12 months?
I want to give myself more breaks. I've actually booked a holiday. I haven't had one in so long, and I need to give myself more designated days off. I want to do more media work, definitely, to basically keep getting the message out there, and I want to do more writing as well. I actually really enjoy it, so I want to do more of that.
Yeah.
That's the goal. I'm still working on how to get all that achieved, but give me some time and I'll make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like getting the message out to the wider public, the people who probably aren't bloggers or aren't, really in the online space on Twitter and Instagram and everything. And
Yeah, exactly.
they're the people who read these like sensationalized headlines from the Daily Mail and places like that and believe it. So
Yeah,
you're the person they
exactly. Yeah.
need.
It's what I keep telling people.
Yeah. So last question is, finally, where can people go to follow you online, and where can people go to get your book, The Wellness Rebel?
So the book is currently in pretty much all UK bookshops. It's also in Tesco and Waitrose selected stores. You can also get it on Amazon or WH Smith. And the book depository also does free international shipping, so you can get it from anywhere in the world. Online, I am at plantbased Pixie, one word, on Twitter and Facebook, and plantbased_Pixie on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me. And I also have my nutrition services you can find on pixieturnernutrition.com.
Amazing. And all of that will be linked in the show notes, so everyone can head to cathorrocks.com/podcast, and all of Pixie's links and the links to the book will be in there as well. Thank you so
Amazing.
much for chatting to me today.
That's been great fun. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you so much for watching and listening, everyone. I will see you soon with another episode. Bye.
Bye.